I am Lisa Harnett, and today we are tackling 4 common questions to manage and optimize your costs. I have with me Savannah Jensen and Rosa Corley, who work with customers every day on managing costs for customers, helping them understand and optimize, understand all of those things. But this is cloud financial management, and when at AWS, we tend to talk about this in terms of plan, run, see, and save. How do I understand what I'm planning to spend, whether it's budgeting or estimating what a new workload would cost? How am I managing and controlling that once I start getting it up and running to make sure that I'm spending in the way that I want to? How do I see what that spend actually is and allocate that back to the different business units? And then how do I optimize it and save? What are the things that I can do to make sure that I'm spending efficiently and getting the value that I planned for out of the spend? And so that's when we talk about cloud financial management. You may also hear this called as FinOps in other groups. So that's the idea of these CFM talks. They all cover this kind of topic. And I mentioned that Savannah and Rosa are here today to join us. And they focus on supporting customers and collaborating with them. And they're part of dedicated account teams so that they work with specific customers long-term. And the 3 of us have, for multiple years now, been involved with customers and understanding how they're developing that culture that pays attention to cost, not as an exclusive thing, but as part of overall managing that financial process and that cost transparency, and especially that cost efficiency. It's really about efficiency, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But as we've mentioned at the start of this is about tackling 4 common questions. We actually threw in a bonus question, but the questions we're tackling here today are: what do I need to do to make sure my cost optimization is actionable? What tools can I use to establish cost visibility? How do I drive ownership and accountability? And what should I consider in building a cost optimization into the culture of my business? And our bonus question is: what have other customers done that's worked well? One of the things that I do beyond these CFM talks as a host is I run a program called Cloud Financial Management Peer Connect, and that is all about customers sharing stories with each other. And so I'm bringing some of that experience from those, as well as the experience that Rosa and Savannah have from working individually with customers over the years. So while we're tackling those 4 questions, we're going to actually not do it question by question. We're going to talk about it in broader categories. So an overview of some of the foundation that you need for success, a review of some of the available resources that you have to you, and then some evangelism strategies. And then we'll do a summary at the end. So thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to go ahead and start talking about some of those foundations for success. We talked about cloud financial management having 4 components. One of them was that plan. And when you move to the cloud, or when you consider moving to the cloud, one of the things that you likely did was some kind of analysis of what the benefit of moving to the cloud would be. And one of the ways we look at that is the Cloud Value Framework. And when you look at optimization, we think you should look at that in the same way. So when you move to the cloud, one of the ideas might have been cost savings. So just infrastructure cost savings, avoidance of having to buy another server, being able to turn things off and only pay for them when you use them if you have turned things off on weekends or other areas. But also you would have thought about staff productivity. By moving these things to the cloud, you might have been able to get rid of some of those costs that your folks were having to incur just in their own time to manage and monitor operational resilience, the benefit of having those backups, the redundancy across data centers, being able to reduce those unplanned outages, and also business agility, not having to wait 3 months, 6 months, a year to get the approval for funding, the approval for, and then actually getting boxes shipped, getting them into the data center and connected so you can actually start working with them. And sustainability, being able to monitor your environmental impact. So these same areas, when we talk about optimization, are the same areas you should be talking with your customers about, or your customers, but your constituents, your application teams, if you're on an application team, your developers. Thinking about optimization, not just in terms of did I turn a resource off, but can I save myself time and frustration by automating some of these things by taking advantage of the value that's in the cloud. So when we talk about optimization, it goes back to those ideas. But some of those optimization areas are managing your access to on-demand resources, being able to turn it off, forecasting with variable usage so that auto-scaling, such things like auto-scaling groups or different sizes of machines at different times or things like that. Understanding your pricing options, understanding your volume tiering, your savings plans, reserved instances, and making sure that there's just an awareness of what the cost of things are, that even though you may get high performance by getting the biggest box out there, maybe you can get away with a smaller box in a cluster that allows you to get a better value and performance. And selecting those optimal resources that match what you need. One of the things that I was just talking with some developers internally about was they had thought that their application was a memory-intensive application. When they started actually looking at the monitor, they realized that it was actually a compute-intensive. They had been buying memory-intensive compute resources, and they were able to switch and get the same performance for a lower cost because they switched the size that matched the type that they needed for their actual workload. So being able to think in terms of those, what's going to give you the best performance is just as important as not just the cost. And making sure that this is continual so that you're understanding what your workloads are for the best performance, but also the best value for that money, that cost governance. So I talked about it in terms of plan, run, see, save, but this is not a continuum. It is really, you need to be doing a little bit of all of these things in order to get the most value. A little bit of planning and forecasting, some kind of management about what you're doing, but key is being able to see what you're doing so you can see the impact of where those things are. So where we see customers do this, it all depends on what's important to them. A lot of them focus in the beginning on how do I start saving? But in order to start saving, one of the things that you'll find is that having that accountability for the folks who are really making those decisions and being able to talk to it in terms that make sense to them, being able for them to see the impact of what they're doing as they're making those changes and being able to take that information as they go and build their next plan. So one of the things that we have seen over time is that the key to success, no matter what you're doing, is getting a sponsorship and a partnership together. That executive sponsor can change everything. We've seen how bringing in an executive level person to an organization in less than a year can totally change how people think about paying attention to cost as part of their process. It gives you a person who's a champion, a person who's an advocate, a person who can advocate for funding. I know that one of the customers I was talking to recently, having that advocate made a difference when they had cost savings, that they didn't lose their budget. A lot of folks work in an environment that tends to be use it or lose it. And that funding advocate was able to show that, yes, we were under here because of the optimizations that we did, but we should keep that budget to be able to use it in another way, to take advantage of that, to be able to still make new innovations happen, because that's what they wanted that savings to be able to do. They gave you an escalation path and making sure that the team has the right resources. So being able to set rules or whatever the focus is, help drive campaigns to make this available. But because of the way the cloud works, everyone can go ahead and make changes to their applications as needed to fit their business needs. Having a partnership between a technology and product teams and the finance or the business teams is really key to making that work, so that as you're planning for things, you have an idea of what that's really going to look like. And it is a team. We talk about it as being a team sport. It's not a solo marathon. You may need a team captain, and your executive sponsor can be that person that helps you resolve issues of priority, helps coach the team on where they should be looking and focusing on. But you really need to make sure that you've got the team together and thinking in the same way. And one of the things with this partnership is different kinds of organizations can use this in different ways. So this is a matrix that we have about different organization types and different ways the partnership can look, depending on what kind of organization you have or where you are in your journey. If you are fast, if you're growing fast and you're focused on driving new customers, new innovations, this is not the area you're going to focus on. But you might want to invest with someone like a partner. Maybe there's a partner out there that can help you, who takes you pay them as a percentage of your optimization that they gain for that. We've talked with people in private equity or people who are running startups. That's the way that they tend to do. In this case, they focus on buying something that works for them and not building it in-house. And so it takes the burden off of the team that's focused on innovation. As you get more advanced, they tend to move into a part-time person on staff. And then from there, they tend to grow to a centralized or a hybrid model. Once you start putting a person in place, that's when you should be looking at if you're at a higher spend. And you should be looking at this just the same way you would look at your cloud spend. If you can start to justify that there's enough optimizations out there that you'll get a value from that help fund that person, that's when you start investing in a person. But having a centralized team and that executive sponsor, someone who's visible as in charge of this, can be really key to making this actionable. A lot of teams end up in the hybrid model where they've got a central team in one place, and then they've got different ambassadors out in the different business units, or they've got a centralized team like a cloud business office that owns all of it, but they provide coaching out to those application teams, and there's roles and responsibilities for the different areas. So pick the one that works for you. When we talk about these roles, one of the ones that we use often is the centralized CFM model. Is a good starting place because it helps you set those standards before you start to figure out what things make sense to push out to other areas in the business. So having a person who's or a role that's focused on a product owner, they own the product, any cloud vendor support that you're getting, they are providing the support for anything that you're building or maintaining in terms of visibility, and they help enable those teams on their cloud journey. Then there is and this might all be one person, it could be multiple people, depends on the size of your organization, but they're consulting on those projects and giving updates on what's happening with AWS products, maybe working with the AWS account team to bring that in, and they're also looking at contract and risk management. But the other thing that they're driving is standardization of methods and processes. So understanding what's working in different parts of the business and bringing that knowledge back to other teams. They would also be collaborating with finance on any other initiatives and communicating this back out. Savannah will talk more about a lot of these things there as well. But we've seen customers be successful in the beginning with a part-time person, and as they continue onward in their journey, being able to go to 2 or more. It all depends on what the value is and what you put into it and where you're really driving value. But having this team and this partnership and its person in charge is one of the key things we've seen with success in this area, is that it has to be viewed as important, and it doesn't have to be viewed necessarily as an extra thing as part of their job, but finding ways to make cost just another thing, just like security is another thing. This isn't extra, it's part of the job. So those are the ideas that we've seen be really helpful with customers. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rosa, who will talk about cost visibility and the optimization of resources.
Thank you, Lisa. So one of the main common problems that I have seen across customers is that they don't really have a clear view of their spend or know how to utilize the tools that they have. So how can you ensure you're set up for success? By making sure cost visibility is properly configured, either by enabling your cost and usage report, deploying dashboards, or learning how to use the tools and services AWS provides. Cost visibility will not only help you visualize your cost and usage, but also help meet or exceed your financial goals, either by setting up AWS budgets, identify cost optimization opportunities, and drive accountability trust from within your teams and upper C-suite. Next slide, please. This graph is a good example of what AWS resources are readily available for you, based on the ability to customize and the level of cost and usage details. Starting from the AWS Billing and Cost Management dashboard, which provides an overview of your AWS costs across all accounts, regions, services, and top cost trends, from analyzing your bills and viewing PDF invoices, to using AWS Cost Explorer to enable you to visualize, understand, and manage your costs and usage over time, or the AWS Cost and Usage Report, which provides granular data at the resource level. Next slide. Here are some of the tools and services AWS has readily available. I have selected a few of the many cost management tools and split them into 3 different categories: measurement and accountability, monitoring, and cost optimization. These tools can help you get started by identifying your cost and usage data across different visualizations, alert notifications, finding potential savings, and optimization opportunities. I'll not be covering everything on this slide, but just to highlight a few that can make an impact, starting with measurement and accountability. One of my most commonly requested tools is the Cloud Intelligence dashboards. Now, these are preset templates that utilizes the data from the cost and usage reports and interprets the data into visuals by using Amazon QuickSight. For example, one of my customers deployed the Kudos dashboard to their storage team in order to have a combined centralized view of their other EBS S3 and EBS unit costs and spend by storage class and volume type within a 6-month period. The customer was very pleased with the results, as it eliminated 10 hours a week of manual importing and exporting data and helped identify up to 20% savings. Next is the AWS Cost Anomaly Detection. This is a free service which helps reduce cost surprises using machine learning by identifying unusual spend at the granularity level based on your specifications, and for a small charge can be notified via Amazon SNS alert notification. A great use case, one of my customers they used the cost anomaly detection and paired it with AWS budget. By setting multiple alerts, they were able to plan and control their cost of budgets and use it to investigate what caused their spike in order to help reduce unforeseen charges on their next bill. Lastly, if you want to know which of your team's AWS resources are under-provisioned or over-provisioned, the Compute Optimizer identifies whether AWS resources such as EC2, EBS, Lambda, and Amazon ECS services on Fargate are optimal and offers recommendations to improve cost and performance by using machine learning and Amazon CloudWatch metrics. And one example, the customer had EC2 instances that they wanted to right size, but were very reluctant on doing so based on the mixed recommendations they were receiving from different toolings. The customer decided to use Compute Optimizer to view the recommendations and really liked the fact that not only could they see the EC2 instances price difference, instance type, and migration effort rating in one dashboard, but also a simulated graphic on performance improvement based on CloudWatch and the enhanced infrastructure metrics feature. Next slide, please. Now, we're constantly getting asked, what are the common KPIs other customers are using to track progress? And it really depends on what is important to you and the goals within your organization. There are several different KPIs one can utilize, such as tracking your storage or compute unit cost and usage, basing it on production versus non-production, or your commitment utilization. But the most important to note is to start with at least one KPI. For example, do a deep dive on how you can decrease the elasticity, if it's either by setting up instance scheduler or deleting underutilized instances. And if you're just starting and would like to start tracking KPIs, the KPI dashboard in the well-architected lab lets you track percent on demand and potential cost savings by meeting certain KPIs and goals for your organization. I'll pass this on to Savannah, in which she'll discuss the optimization efforts in practice.
All right. So we've talked a little bit about kind of the foundations that you need to have within your organization to get started on these things and to make sure that you have kind of the tools that you need to monitor your spend, understand your spend, and really track the progress. But what do some of these optimization efforts actually look like in practice, and what are some of the things that we've seen our customers be successful with? So I'll be going through a list of a couple of them today and giving some examples for each one of kind of how we've seen folks implement it and what we've seen be successful. But really the key is iterating, trying things out, and giving kind of different forms of recognition programs or kind of opportunities a try to understand exactly what it is that's going to be most effective for your organization and get the folks engaged. So the first one and kind of the baseline one that we've seen people start with is coming up with some sort of recognition program. It's really hard to get traction around optimization activities, especially with technical staff, if they don't have the ability to get recognized or really see the differences that their efforts are making in the organization. So figuring out some way from either an operational perspective or a business unit perspective or kind of technical subsets, if you've got Scrum teams, to kind of recognize those efforts, recognize that progress, and showcase it a little bit is definitely key to getting folks excited and getting folks engaged. This recognition can really come in a lot of different forms. It is important to pick one that's going to work well with your organization and work well with your company culture. If you're already all about kind of the gold star stickers and recognizing things with little treats, then absolutely kind of see if you can figure out something that is close to that for optimization recognition. If you're more about highlighting opportunities or kind of places to improve, then definitely kind of shape that recognition around that theme instead. So one example of what we've seen a customer do, Lisa, if you can go to the next slide, is basically develop a recognition award program and implement it across the organization. So in this example, the central FinOps team decided to reward these optimization activities, and they created what they called an Optimization All-Star Award. The winners were announced monthly based on total dollars saved per business unit. So across their business, they kind of chunked everybody up into teams based on which product they worked on and which business they worked in, and then recognized those optimization all-stars throughout the year. At the end of the year, the business unit with the most winners got a prize. So that kind of reward went out across the entire department, which was awesome. From an operational perspective, making sure that you are thinking about how to lean into these opportunities to recognize achievements, creating that space to recognize the folks who are doing good work, and kind of following up to make sure that those recognition pieces keep happening is definitely critical. I saw on the poll at the beginning of the webinar that we've got a lot of tech staff on the webinar today. So from your perspective as an engineer or as somebody who is hands-on keyboard working on a product every day, making sure that you're recognizing your peers for this optimization work is really critical as well. Oftentimes, especially cleanup activities aren't necessarily the most glamorous thing to do. So making sure that you're patting your folks on the back and saying, hey, good job on this. This really makes an impact for the business. And also building cost awareness and optimization activities into stand-ups, into your dev cycle, and into your rhythm of business will go a long way to make sure that those things are kind of kept at the top of mind. Next slide, please. So the other thing that we've seen be very effective is some sort of optimization event that's sponsored by the organization. These can be called a lot of different things. Recently, you'll likely hear them called fin hacks pretty often, or you'll hear that terminology. Key things to know here are that there are kind of some established AWS programs out there already that you can either use for inspiration or possibly leverage depending on the needs of your organization. So whether it is standing up something that's akin to an immersion day, but with a cost focus, or kind of going through the FinHack program to stand up a FinHack event that's a little bit more structured, we do have some resources that you can leverage there to get started. The two main things that will make these events or any event that you decide to stand up successful are encouraging action, so making sure that you have time prioritized for hands-on keyboard optimization activities. That's going to give your technical staff and the folks who participate in these events time to make those changes, and therefore you'll have outcomes directly after that event that you can measure, document, kind of demonstrate the value of the event in total. So all of that optimization work that folks do during the event itself can then be measured and used to kind of see how successful it was, maybe advocate for either some prizes, perhaps, if that's kind of how you run your business or how you encourage folks internally, or show the executive folks that this was a good use of time, and advocate for another one in the future if that's needed or if that's useful. So how this can actually look in practice, we had a customer that built a custom kind of thin hackathon for themselves that was fairly brief to keep it kind of snappy and keep everybody engaged the entire time without a huge time commitment and without taking folks off of their kind of day-to-day work for too long. So the way that they framed it was they had a morning education session where they brought in some specialists from AWS, some folks within the organization who already had experience kind of in the work that they wanted to do, gave those education pieces so that people knew what they had to action. And then in the afternoon, they did a hands-on hackathon and basically just let everybody who attended take that afternoon to go chase down these optimization activities, do the work to do that cleanup, and implement them. They split everybody up into teams during kind of the hackathon event, and the team that found and actioned the most optimizations won a prize, which is obviously always exciting. From an operational perspective, again, really that organization piece of it, making sure that we've got space to host these events, championing these events and making sure that people are aware of them, engaged in them, and advocating to leadership to get that buy-in to dedicate engineering time to cost-focused events is really critical. And then from an engineering perspective, making sure that you are participating in any fin hacks or kind of optimization events that your organization throws, and then applying those skills to your daily work afterwards is really critical, because that's going to let you take that optimization knowledge into your daily rhythm of business and continue to save as you kind of move forward through your rhythm of business throughout the year. So another kind of hybrid almost of the last two is a quarterly campaign or possibly a monthly campaign, depending on kind of the cadences that are built into your business in general. So in this case, what we're talking about when we say quarterly campaign is identifying a couple topics that you want to focus on throughout the year and then dedicating time to those topics specifically. So this can really help if your organization suffers from analysis paralysis, or if you have kind of a lot to tackle at once and you don't really know where to start. Kind of taking a step back, identifying where to start, looking at those top cost drivers, looking at those opportunities to improve, and then really taking a tactical approach with different phases can help drive action on that without being overwhelming or without kind of overwhelming your schedule too much. Big thing to note here is that after you've identified which pieces to focus on, making sure that you establish a cadence that works for your business is really critical too. If you have quarterly launches, or you know that kind of quarter close is really stressful for your engineering staff or for people who do this work or who would be actioning cost optimization activities during the day, as a financial operations team, it's good to be thoughtful of that. Maybe kind of establish a shifted quarter system so that this doesn't just hit the end of everybody's month-end to-do list or quarter-end to-do list and get kind of pushed to the bottom or become another stressor. So being thoughtful about that cadence and kind of taking into account what's happening into your business is really critical to the success of kind of quarterly campaigns like these. So example of how this looks in practice, one of the customers that my team works with declared 2022 the year of cleanup, and basically established quarterly challenges that fit with that theme. So they started a little bit lower lift with Q1 and Q2. Q1 was deleting those unattached EBS volumes, doing that snapshot cleanup, and then terminating idle instances in Q2. So really focusing on those cleanup activities, getting people used to the idea of kind of taking these things quarter by quarter and having a quarterly challenge, getting into that rhythm. In Q3 and Q4, they went a little bit more advanced and focused on kind of leveraging instant scheduler, pause and resume functionality and adopting that elasticity in Q3. And then for Q4, focus on storage and getting kind of all of that S3 usage into the deepest storage tier possible to be cost effective. So overall, the focus on kind of one thing per quarter, really let them chunk this up into little bite-sized pieces that were a little bit easier to implement and get traction on. And at the end of the year, they could kind of report on how much each quarter saved them, how much more adoption they had of similar functionality or kind of similar best practices after the end of that quarter, and really track it throughout the year, which is excellent. From an operational perspective, really your job is to understand what is going to be most effective, most topical, and where these needs are when you're kind of thinking through how to organize a quarterly challenge or any sort of optimization initiative. And then from an engineering perspective, if you have or see a need that would be helpful or could be kind of applicable to one of these quarterly challenges or something like it, absolutely communicate that to FinOps, suggest a quarterly challenge, suggest kind of a theme even, or kind of prompt the folks who are in governance to chunk things up into more manageable pieces in a similar mechanism and provide any sort of documentation or education that's going to help you guys get started. Right. So the next one, and this is, I think, getting more common as companies scale on the cloud and kind of establish a larger cloud footprint, is remembering that learning from your peers is incredibly important. So oftentimes, especially depending on business structures or kind of if a company has gone through any mergers, acquisitions, et cetera, we end up with these silos that can be kind of the antithesis of what we want when it comes to cross-team collaboration and learning from each other. So establishing that cross-team communication, learning from each other, and making sure that the folks who've kind of attacked one piece of the cost optimization puzzle are sharing those lessons learned and documenting them with other folks who are maybe focused on a different service or focused on a different kind of work type is really critical, because it allows everybody to kind of share that information and push each other forward. What this can look like in practice can depend a little bit, but we've got one example here where the FinOps team really helped build some of these bridges and helped roll out a test case. So with this customer specifically, FinOps was looking at spend after a peak event and noticed that S3 was one of the top cost drivers. They did some homework to research and evaluate the different optimization methodologies for S3 and discovered S3 INT would likely be a really good fit for this use case. They then reached out to some of the business units that they thought would be good kind of candidates, identified one that had a couple buckets and was willing to work with them, cycled those buckets into S3 INT, and then partnered with that business unit to monitor the progress for 4 months and kind of see the benefit and see if that impacted any of their kind of technical rhythms of business at all. At the end of that trial period, they were saving quite a bit and hadn't kind of really noticed at all in terms of the technical use case and their daily business and accessing those S3 files. So what FinOps then did was brought this group into kind of their global cadence or their all hands to talk a little bit about that use case, evangelize the savings that they'd seen, and then made them available for questions. So this business unit kind of got the opportunity to be that expert and then share their success and their best practices, what they've noticed and everything with all of their peers. A year on, the customer in general had reduced their total S3 cost by 30% across the organization and established some org-wide best practices for S3. That business unit was still kind of established as the expert in the space, and they had kind of effectively shared that knowledge and shared that impact with folks across the organization. So from an operational perspective, and as a FinOps team, the big responsibility that you have and the big way that you can make a difference is by kind of understanding what's out there, making those impactful connections and encouraging that collaboration. So understanding who's doing what, how they could possibly interlock and who could learn from whom is really critical. From an engineering perspective, everything that you can do to avoid siloing is really key. Sharing what's worked well for you with other business units is also a big win, and it allows you to kind of share the love, share the joy, and be an expert in something that you've kind of already seen be successful with your group. All right, next slide, please. So another mechanism that's kind of a little bit similar to a few of the ones that we've discussed is earmarking an optimization hour or producing internal webinars, possibly similar to the one that you are watching right now. So setting aside time within your organization that is dedicated to cloud financial management or cost optimization topics can be incredibly effective. Blocking the calendar, making sure that that's top of mind and something that people are seeing every week is key and can kind of keep it more up to speed in their mind. The thing that I see people get stuck on sometimes is feeling like they need to come up with content for all of these. And really the kind of hack, shall we say, there is leveraging what's already out there. So leveraging those AWS programs, leveraging recordings within the series of CFM talks that you're kind of tuned into right now, leveraging Peer Connect, all of those learning opportunities that are already out there can make this a lighter lift and really slot in well for your CFM team. In terms of implementation, one example of something that we've seen work well is basically blocking a optimization hour every other week. So that's 2 a month, put it on the entire company's calendar. One of those blocks ended up being used for internal education. So that was either a webinar, some sort of recording that AWS provided, or somebody within the customer and within the company themselves coming in, talking about what's worked well for them and sharing that knowledge a little bit. The other time block was earmarked for internal kind of hands-on optimization. So that gave folks a time slot that wasn't chewed up by another meeting and was really dedicated to doing that optimization work. So that is kind of helpful to accelerate that action and prioritize that hands-on keyboard time, like we kind of talked about a little bit in the FinHack and event section. So at the end of the day, this is a very kind of manageable amount of time slot. It prioritizes that optimization work and it gives everybody both a reminder and an opportunity to fit that into their day. From an operational perspective, again, the organization piece and really kind of the ideation is critical, making sure that you are aware and leveraging those existing resources like webinars, like Peer Connect, blog series, etc., is also going to be key here if you are leveraging one of these blocks for internal education. And then from an engineering perspective, making sure that you prioritize those things that are put on your calendar. If FinOps decides to move forward with something like this, spending that optimization time block to actually do that optimization work and do some of that self-study is critical. And again, just making sure that it's prioritized in your rhythms of business and in your day is key. All right, so to sum up here, we've got some time for questions, but kind of to recap, ownership and that executive sponsorship are really critical to making sure that any sort of optimization activity or any sort of cloud financial management activity is successful. Cost visibility, making sure that you have a way to look at those costs, track them, and even if you start very simple with the KPIs, having something to track so you can see your progress, measure it, and kind of continue that momentum is incredibly important. And then in terms of implementing this in practice and evangelizing it throughout your business, we've gone through a couple of examples of how folks have done this effectively. What works for your business might be a little bit different. The key is to experiment, try something out, iterate, and really find what's going to work for you in order to keep everything topical and keep this top of mind for all the folks who really are in the cloud every day for their work. All right.
I'll go ahead and cover the staying updated. As Savannah already mentioned, we have a variety of things that we do that you can leverage in your work. Obviously, these events, we have Peer Connect, which will be next week. We have the blog that we update on a regular basis, and there is a regular Twitch show on Thursdays. We've got a news bot over on Twitter, and so you can keep up to date with those kinds of resources. And for some of the things we've talked about today, there is a references slide. And this recording, this presentation is recorded, and the slides will be available to you. But these are some of the resources that we've mentioned before in terms of the well-architected cost optimization pillar is where you'll have information about that cost intelligence dashboard that Rosa mentioned earlier, as well as we've got links in here for budgets and cost anomaly detection and compute optimizer that she also mentioned. So with that, we're going to go to Q&A. And one of the things I want to talk about before we start that is and invite Savannah and Rosa to come back on camera so we can all answer questions, is that one of the things we've seen is that embedding these things in work you're already doing can be super important. So Savannah mentioned that, that training time that they had on the schedule to do self-service. If you've already got a training schedule that you're already providing internal webinars, just dedicating maybe one of the events every month or on a regular, if you've got 12 events a year, maybe 4 of them a year to cover something related to cost optimization. Or if you've already, kind of including that, if you've already got measurements that track some of that application health, adding cost is just another element of application health, can be really important so that it's not an extra thing, that it's just another thing that you add on. So one of the questions we have in here is, do we run CFM workshops to understand the scope at an individual services level or different areas? What kind of workshop would you recommend?
So it depends a little bit on specifically what you're looking for and the level of technical depth. It's hard to give kind of a one-size-fits-all answer for this. I would recommend reaching out to your AWS support, your account team, your account manager with kind of a distinct question about a certain service, if you want to target a certain service, or something that's a little bit more targeted. Depending on what it is, we can generally bring in some sort of specialist team, whether that is somebody who's a little bit more well-versed with cloud financial management at a deeper level, or if it is a more technical question, we can pull in a specialist who is kind of dedicated to that specific service and can talk about optimizing that service specifically through some sort of spec rec program or specialty engagement. So it really kind of just depends on specifically what you're asking for, but definitely start with your AWS account team as the first line of defense there, because they can help coordinate and help locate those folks internally.
Yeah. And I do think that oftentimes it's better to, if you're doing it on specific services, making sure that you've prioritized what that one would be, understanding that if you're going to focus down on one service, you understand who's really using it so that you're getting to the right audience. I know there's some things that are more niche that might have really cool optimizations available, but it may not hit everybody. So understanding what service you're focusing on to the team that needs it. Some things are, more generic, like how to use a dashboard or how to understand their costs, whether it's through the Cloud Intelligence dashboard or through Cost Explorer or through some third party. So that can be part of the education as well. Don't see a lot of questions. So is there anything else, Rosa or Savannah, you guys want to add before we move on to upcoming events?
No.
Nothing from me.
All right.
Tell us what's coming up, Lisa.
What's coming up? Well, next week it's Peer Connect, my favorite part of the week, of the month, and it is the third Wednesday of every month. But we have Sports Bet, and they're talking about several of the ways that they iterated and changed over their years in the cloud. So that's actually next week. Next month, we'll be talking about understanding your bill through cost allocation strategies for the CFM talk. And on Thursday, there will be the Twitch show. Do you guys know what's on Twitch this week?
I'm looking it up right now. Short answer, no, but give me like 30 seconds.
I do know there are some people on here that are avid followers of our Twitch show, so I'm pretty sure someone can chime in.
Thank you for.
It looks like we are keyed up to talk about FinOps automation based on our schedule. So tune in for that tomorrow morning or afternoon, depending where you are in the world.
All right. Well, apparently the prompt that we might talk about next events, they've started putting some more questions in. So do we have any tooling specifically for digging into Kubernetes? Any thoughts on understanding that Kubernetes cost? I know
So,
Compute Optimizer did yes recently, but that's not the same.
Rosa, go ahead.
I'm trying to think of something from the top of my head.
Yeah, so I've engaged our Kubernetes specialist team a little bit in the past to talk about optimization strategies that are specific to my customers' use cases. I know there are a variety of AWS partners that make products that are a little bit deeper in terms of Kubernetes visibility. Again, it depends a little bit on which service you're using to run Kubernetes. So I would recommend reaching out to your account team for more detail with a specific question.
Yep.
And then,
do you have anything else, Rosa?
Nope.
Okay. And then another question we have is on next-gen upgrades for cost optimization.
yeah, so absolutely. We usually talk about that by calling it modernization or Graviton adoption, depending on kind of what you're doing and which instance family and which service you're upgrading. But short answer, yes, absolutely. Graviton offerings especially give you a much higher performance for a similar instance size, as well as a price cut on the sticker price. So generally where I've seen kind of the biggest bang for your buck is following through and doing some right sizing after you upgrade to the newest instance family. So I see customers get like a first chunk of cost taken off when they first migrate, if they just do like to like, and then generally we'll get some additional savings with that follow on, as long as they can do that right sizing, given that the new instances that they've upgraded to have that better performance from being newer and kind of the latest and greatest.
Yep, and I think that the Cloud Intelligence dashboards, one of the optimization charts has a view of what kind of age of if you've got older instance types.
So yeah,
that
that's
could
the
be
KPI
upgraded
dashboard.
so that you can track
That's a really good one too. You can also look at.
Yeah, so that KPI dashboard can be important. It can help you. It can tell you if that a next gen upgrade makes sense in your environment, or if people are already making those kinds of choices naturally. So thank you for that. I'm not seeing any more questions. So I'm going to go ahead and thank our audience for being here today. And thank you, Rosa and Savannah, for being here. I always appreciate hearing what you guys have going on and your advice to everybody. So thanks so much for being here, everybody. And if you have thoughts on the next time, I think we have what topic would you like to hear about in the future? I'm going to launch that before we close. If you want to give that feedback. And thank you so much for being here. There will also be a survey when you leave.